Wonderful. I'm calling back to order this session of the Sacramento City Unified School District's Board of Education. We're going to begin this evening with our broadcast statement by our student board member, Nguyen.
This meeting of the Sacramento City School Board is being recorded in its entirety and will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse. Today's meeting will air Monday, April 9th at noon and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. We welcome members of the audience to address the board. Please complete a speaker form located in the back of the community room and give them to our communications representative along with any handouts that you may have for the board prior to the conclusion of the item's presentation. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Please limit comments during public comment to items that are not on the agenda. If you do comment on an item that is on the agenda, we will ask that you please defer your comments until your item comes up on the agenda. Please also turn off your cell phones or place them on silent or vibrate. Thank you.
Thank you, student member Nguyen. Item 4.2, the Pledge of Allegiance, tonight, which will be led by Tabia Helberg Tiltotson, I hope I have pronounced that correctly. If I haven't, I will correct, of C.K. McClatchy's High School. And that will be followed by a presentation with a special certificate by board member Hanson.
Tavy here.
Is it Tavia?
Tavy.
Okay, lovely. Come right up here.
Oh, welcome.
Good evening, Tavy.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Oh, Tavy, come back. You can stay up here, please. Thank you.
Yeah, you're not getting off that easy. You can't pin us. We're all the way up here. So yeah. I want to honor you as two different, I mean, there's many different reasons. When I read your bio, really remarkable. One, you're only the second wrestler within our school district to ever win a state individual title.
Wow.
And I believe you're the only woman who's ever won that title. And so you are the state wrestling champion for your weight class, which is remarkable, and representing McClatchy High School and their first wrestling champion as well in their 80-plus year history. So that's really remarkable. But But as the ads say, that's not all. You are a junior, and you, in your first semester, you achieved a 4.0 GPA. So the wrestling is just a part of the whole amazing package. Your coaches, Sean and Joel Smith, are to be congratulated as well. Your wrestling season record was 29-1, and your only loss was to the number one ranked girl in the entire nation. So you can still hold your head up pretty high. It's pretty remarkable. You placed first in several regular season and postseason tournaments. And at the CIF California State Wrestling Tournament, you wrestled at a completely different level. Her first 4 victories were by pins. The times for the pin were 1 minute, 34 seconds, 1 minute, 37 seconds, 37 seconds, and then 1 minute, 10 seconds. And you went a full 6 minutes in the championship bout, but were in complete command throughout and achieved a final score of 7-3. Additionally, you did not give up a single offensive point in the postseason. And in fact, you did not give up an offensive point in any of your 29 victories this season. Of your 29 victories, 27 of them were by pin. That is a remarkable wrestling record, and I'm excited that you've got a great academic record. You're a tribute to McClatchy and to our entire school district, so congratulations for that, and I have a certificate I'd like to present you.
We should do a student spotlight for the newsletter.
Yes. See if you get pinned, Board Member Hanson.
All of these jokes.
Thank you. Let's give Tavi one more round of applause. What a remarkable accomplishment. Item 5.0, announcement of action taken in closed session.
Yes, Madam President, one announcement out of closed session. The board approved through board members President Ryan, Vice President Wu, Board Member Hanson, Pritchett, and Vang voting approval with Board Member Second Vice President Minnick abstaining. And also Board Member Cochran absent, approved special education settlement number in case 2017-120543. And that concludes the announcements out of closed session, Madam President.
Thank you. Item 6.0, agenda adoption. Before I entertain a motion to adopt the agenda, it looks like we'll be modifying the agenda slightly tonight. After the board agenda was posted for today's meeting, the district was informed that the School of Engineering and Sciences robotics team was invited to participate in the first robotics competition championship in Houston, Texas, where thousands of students will compete on the world stage at this incredible event. Since this is an out-of-state field trip that's going to occur from April 18th to the 21st, and the next board meeting won't happen until April 19th, I'm requesting that the board add 9.1H to the consent agenda as follows. 9.1H, approve School of Engineering and Sciences field trip to Houston, April 18th to 21st for first robotics competition. May I please have a motion to add this? Second? Student preferential vote?
Aye.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. The motion passes. We'll be adding this to the agenda, and congratulations. We're so excited to be able to celebrate this. Then on to item 6.0, agenda adoption. Do I have a motion? Second? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Any against? No. The motion carries, so we're adopting the agenda. Item 7.0, public comment.
We have 4 public comments. If you could line up in order, please, when you hear your name. David Porter, Eric Wiesenthal, Ken Davis, and Chris and Melanie from SCS Robotics.
And Alex, if you wouldn't mind, so we do have a couple representatives from SCS who will be speaking in public comment. Okay, we definitely want to hear from you, so wonderful. I'm glad to hear that you've put your name in place.
Good evening. My name is David Porter, and I'm a parent of a McClatchy student. I have 2 concerns I want to bring to your attention tonight. They both involve the alleged sexual assault of a McClatchy student. According to the girl's lawsuit, she and her family told school officials that she was drugged and raped at a party by 2 McClatchy students, and that she was bullied and harassed when she returned to school. School employees are here to educate, protect, and nurture the students, our children, and they have mandatory duties under the law to report cases of even suspected child abuse. But the lawsuit alleges the school employees did not protect this student. And not only did they fail to protect her and inform her of her rights, they actually required her to leave school for the remainder of the semester because, and I quote, her presence was distracting to other students. Now, we all know that not everything in lawsuits, alleged in lawsuits, is true. But I've had an experience that makes me think this lawsuit should be taken seriously. In 2015, just 1 year before this incident was reported to the school, I received a call from the mother of a McClatchy student. Her family came to this country as refugees several years earlier, and her daughter was being severely harassed and bullied at school, even being followed home. Being new to the country, the mother called me and asked me what she should do. I recommended she report the incidents to the vice principal and counselor, assuring her the school had priorities and procedures in place to protect her daughter. A month later, the mother called and said her daughter transferred out of McClatchy to another high school. When I asked why, she said that's what the school recommended. In that incident, the problem was the bullies, not the victim. But the school failed to protect the victim, and she's the one who had to leave the school. This sounds too familiar to the 2016 incident, and I fear this newly revealed story is just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. My other concern is the school's handling of the student-led walkout on March 21st. Over 200 students rallied. They bravely recounted painful memories of when they too felt harassed or assaulted at school and elsewhere, but school officials failed to act when it was reported. This was a Me Too moment, and the community needs to pay attention and support these students. I found the school's response deeply disturbing. Teachers who might have supported the student walkout were called in for questioning. This is exactly the wrong message to send. If students and families feel the school is more interested in keeping teachers in line than in protecting the students, if they feel there is nowhere to turn for their legitimate concerns to be addressed, they will turn to the streets, something Sacramento has seen all too much of lately.
Thank you.
In conclusion, I am here to ask the board for greater transparency on how families can expect such matters to be handled. I am here to ask that we have the ability to verify that staff are trained in their legal obligations and mandatory reporters. Finally, we, the families, need to be confident that these important issues will be handled in a timely and professional manner.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments tonight. The superintendent, board member Hanson, and myself sat in on a student-led presentation about a week and a half ago, presenting many of the same recommendations that you've brought forth tonight, so we will be following up. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I can remind our speakers that we have coming up, we have 2 minutes each, and I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you.
My name is Eric Wiesenthal. I, too, am a parent of a student going to McClatchy High School. And while I'm extremely proud of what's going on at the high school, I am very disappointed and discouraged by the events that have occurred connected to this alleged rape incident. And I find one of the most disturbing aspects, if it is true, that the resource officer who apparently knew of all the details was then transferred to another school. And I just wanted to make one other point, is that the entire administration at the high school, from Principal Lambert on down, should have been aware of everything that was going on and taken action then. So I hope, as my friend David Porter has just stated, that we will have greater transparency and that students and parents can be assured that their kids are going to a place that is safe where they can learn. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Davis. I am the robotics coach at School of Engineering and Science. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your support for our robotics program. We wouldn't be able to do this without your support. As you may have heard, we've just had a successful tournament in Idaho, where we took all of our kids up to the Idaho Regional, and we won the Engineering Inspiration Award. That is the second highest award that you could win in the FRC, which is First Robotics Competition program. It is valued so much that NASA has paid for our competition fee in the world competition in Houston, Texas. This is the first time we've qualified for the world competitions, where we'll be competing against approximately 600 teams. Getting to Worlds is an expensive endeavor. We make sure that we try to take every student, and any help that we can get in getting those students would be greatly appreciated. Donations can be made at scusrobotics.yolo.com. Again, any donations would be greatly appreciated. But what I really want tonight is I really want you to hear from some of my students. So if I could give the remaining of my time to the students. Yes.
Before you have your students come up and share their names and some information, I would like to dedicate $500 from my board funds towards this field trip, and I encourage my fellow board members to also dedicate some funds. I have to tell you, it's beautiful for me to see all of your faces reflecting the diversity of our community and reaching high and also inspiring other young people to do the same. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Oh, can you also repeat the donation so that we can make sure that we get that recorded? SCS Robotics.
SCSrobotics.yola.com.
YOLO?
YOLA.com.
YOLA.com. Wonderful.
I do have a question.
And do you want to ask the question before the students? We have a question from board member Wu.
Thank you, President. And how are you getting them?
We're going to fly. We're going to fly all 30 students out of Sacramento International Airport to Houston.
Southwest?
Southwest, yes.
I have points I can donate, so.
Thank you.
50, 60,000 that I can donate. Just tell me where I can transfer them. So I can't transfer them to the website. So I have to transfer them to a person.
Okay. Should we do that offline or?
Yes, please. We haven't allocated time for that in our agenda. Wonderful. Now we'd love to hear from the students.
Good evening, members of the school board, Superintendent Jorge Aguilar, and everyone in attendance. Thank you for your time. My name is Christopher Thomas, and this is Melanie Morris. And we are students from the School of Engineering and Sciences and members of our school's FIRST robotics program. FIRST stands for the Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology, and is a nonprofit organization. The mission is to inspire young people to be scientists and technology leaders and innovators, by engaging them in mentor-based programs that build science, engineering, and technology skills, that inspire innovation and that foster well-rounded life capabilities, including self-confidence, communication and collaboration, and leadership. Over 75% of FIRST alumni acquire a professional career in the STEM industry, and 87% of its participants plan to take a more challenging math or science course in school.
Through our robotics team, we have provided access to FIRST to not only a large population of younger students in surrounding schools, but also increase access to FIRST to students at our own school. Roughly 15% of our student body participates in a FIRST program, but our approach to education through the linked learning model has given all of our students access to the tools and technology we use in FIRST, so that even if they never join a robotics program, they have the exposure to make informed decisions about their future career and educational choices.
We have worked to introduce our community to STEM as well through a series of workshops. These workshops are some of our most impactful and well-received community events because they allow us to introduce new students to our school and to FIRST. Our team members gained many skills from these workshops, such as improving skills for academic and career success, communication and collaboration, creativity, innovation and entrepreneurship, critical thinking and problem solving, and life and leadership skills.
You have 2 more minutes since you're combining your comments.
FIRST has provided me with several opportunities, such as pursuing my desired major of robotics engineering. Without robotics, I would have never had access to the STEM as much as I do now, and it is highly unlikely that I would have been able to join a robotics team at another school because of the cost many other schools require to join. I speak from personal experience when I say that FIRST has given me access to a fantastic community of people who have become like a family to me. I don't know where I would be without them today. Because of this, I am asking that you choose to financially support us for the upcoming championships in Houston. Not only are we currently the only school in the district who is able to attend the event this year, but this is the first year our team has been given the opportunity to do so as well. Many of our fellow team members would not have the opportunity to travel out of state otherwise, outside of the team. In addition, we have been able to provide our team members with a cost-free programming, cost-free program not found amongst other teams, allowing us to provide more STEM-related opportunities to students with varying socioeconomic backgrounds.
Personally, by the district supporting STEM programs such as FIRST, I have had the capability to explore my interest in 3D design and further my technological skills. Only 17% of Black men graduate college with a bachelor's degree, and only 4.8% of the STEM industry consists of Black males. Based off these statistics, it is very unlikely that a young man like myself will not successfully enter into the STEM field. But with the support and teaching found in these STEM programs such as FIRST and SCS's linked learning approach to education, students like myself are 3 times as likely to pursue a STEM career. I am one of the millions of students who have been impacted by STEM programs, and I graciously hope that you, the school board, would make the decision today to provide additional funding to ensure the success of these linked learning and STEM programs, the success of our future goals as a society, and the success of the diversification of the STEM industry.
Once again, we thank you for your time and hope that our words inspire you to continue to support these great programs and help us showcase what Sac City Unified School District is doing for its kids on the world stage.
And can I ask you, what is the total amount that you're looking to raise for the Houston field trip?
$30,000.
$30,000 total. Okay, great. We have a question or a comment from board member Minnick.
Got to think about it.
No.
I would just like to join President Ryan in allotting $500 from my discretionary funds to get you a little bit closer to there. It's not $30,000, but it's it might pay for a couple plane tickets. So.
And we also commit to help publicizing this and figuring out other ways to fundraise for you. Looks like we have comments from board member Vang and also from board member Hanson.
Let me do that again. I just want to say congratulations, and I'm extremely proud of each and every one of you. I also want to echo President Ryan and Minnick, Second Vice President Minnick as well, that I will be contributing $500 as well towards the trip. So great job. I'm super excited for you all.
Board member Hanson.
Yep. Well, also congratulations. How really amazing to be able to make it there. And to represent our district. Thank you very much for that. And you can count me in for $500 too. So get on down to Houston.
Wonderful. So we're at 2,000. Let's see if we can up the antes even more. Board member Wu, do you want to counter that?
I wish I could match that, but I looked it up, and I think my 60,000 airline miles would get you about 3 round-trip tickets. So I hope that's helpful.
Wonderful.
And I just wanted to congratulate the team. And I remember how much, when I first joined this board, how much SES struggled as a school. And there was a point in time where we had a design team to review what the future of SES would look like. That was about 7 years ago. And I'm glad to say that the decision of the design team was to keep intact the 7 through 12 academic school. And I'm so glad that you all have been able to thrive in this smaller educational environment, and you're going to be successful. And I'm looking also forward to, if any of you are seniors, you won't be able to take advantage of the new CTE building that will be there soon, but I'm so thankful for that the school is moving forward and upward. So congratulations.
And it looks like our superintendent already tried to sign on to the fundraising link. For some reason, he's having a hard time connecting. So let's make sure that we get that in writing, and we'll push that out through our e-connection and other avenues as well to try and help you reach your fundraising goal. Thank you so much. We're so incredibly proud of you.
Then we also have to invite you back so that you can show us what this winning robotics project is, in fact.
Oh, he's the coolest teacher. I've seen him teach. He's great.
Yeah, Daryl went back. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Patrick.
Do we have any other public comments at this time?
Yes, we do. We have three. If you could line up in order, please. Angel Garcia, followed by Adrian Moreno, followed by Angie Sutherland.
Angel? That's fine.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Angie Sutherland, and I'm a parent, and just wanted to say that my daughter is now attending a private school where she feels happy, she feels valued, she doesn't feel oppressed or taunted for having a disability. She's happy, she's learning. It's been going on for 2 years. It's not something that I've come up and complained about publicly, but I just wanted to let you know that I still hold the district accountable for her education. However, the district has failed her, has not provided her with safety. And she was attacked in December along with 2 other girls. And this didn't need to happen. One of the students who was bullying her at her old school in 5th grade moved into her class in 6th grade. And it started all over again. I don't see why nothing is done about bullying and discrimination of students with disabilities. I've tried to be collaborative, tried to work it out. Who protects her? I've been advocating in this district for about 8 years. I feel very depressed about this. And I wonder, why do the schools have so much autonomy to be able to allow stuff like this to happen? And I noticed on your agenda you always have litigation on there. Well, are you allowing the special ed department to pick and choose who they fight on their own, or are you approving when they fight parents? How much money are we spending on attorneys instead of helping parents and helping students? I would like to know. I would like a report for the last 5 years to show how much money has gone to litigate against parents instead of what would it have cost to just help the kids, not just for my daughter, but for all students. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
You know, I wasn't planning on talking tonight, but I just received a letter. So I've come up and talked a couple of times about bullying and about my son and the things that he was going through. Throughout 7th, and my son's in 9th grade, throughout 7th and 8th grade, he was bullied relentlessly. I found out this summer that he was assaulted. And I won't say what kind of assault, but I'll say it's the type of assault that'll make you shudder and hold your children at night on your campus. It happened on your campus. So you know what response I got from special ed? I'm calling out Becky Bryant. I just received a letter tonight. I had to pull my son out of public school. The last straw was he left for the second time. He left off campus. Nobody knew where he was at. For 2 hours, I looked for him. He suffered over 3 years, mental health disorders, a bunch of different things. He's regressed. He's at a level, my son's in 9th grade. He's at a level below where he was in 6th grade. So you know the letter I got today? A slap in the face from Becky Bryant. She said, if you continue having your son enrolled at Capital Innovations Academy, she threatened that his program may not be funded. She said she's denying that request. She's denying it because guess why? They provided my son a free, appropriate public education. So you tell me then why, during that free, appropriate public education, he was allowed to be assaulted in multiple ways. Just imagine. I'm not going to mention because my child's here. He was allowed to be bullied and called a faggot and called retard and called every name in the book. And then on top of that, he regressed to a level below 6th grade. This district has failed my child. So if it's a fight, I'm going to bring a fight. This is unacceptable. I had to take 2 months off of work to deal with this. I should not be having to pay. So the second day he attended this private school, I got a call from a teacher that says, I will not stop until Adrian develops trust, because we can't do anything until he develops trust. There's under 30 students in that campus. There is a locked campus, and my son is safe. I am so disgusted. I am so disgusted by this. This is unacceptable, and it did not just happen to my son. My son, Adrian, he's going to talk. My son, Adrian, did not deserve to be hurt at the school. And then on top of being hurt, on top of not being protected, now he's going to get slapped in the face that said, you know what? We're not even going to acknowledge it. We provided you a free, appropriate public education. This is unacceptable.
The school district did not do what they should have done for me. I agree. From what I've seen on my report cards, it has been a decrease ever since 6th grade, I believe. And it was pretty heartbreaking to hear the response that I got from it. And I think this should be a time where the school district needs to figure this out, because it's not just me that this is happening to. It's happening to my friend. It happened to my friend. It's happening to other kids. So this is really something that needs to be figured out. And I think this school is the right place for me. And if this doesn't end quickly, then it's going to be more students that this is going to be happening to. They're going to be ending up going in private schools. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for having the courage to speak tonight. I will say, both Angel and Angie, I know you've been two of our most tireless special education advocates. I know how difficult it is, just experiencing firsthand with my own children how to navigate this. And I feel your pain. You know, Angel, you reached out to me earlier this week. We'll be sitting down to talk about this and trying to do everything we can to hear you and figure out a path forward. So thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
No more comments.
We are on to item 8.1, 8.0, Board Workshop Strategic Plan and Other Initiatives, item 8.1, which is the 2017-18 Local Control and Accountability Plan Annual Update.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, board members, and Superintendent Aguilar. It's my pleasure this evening. I'm Vincent Harris with our Continuous Improvement and Accountability Office with Kathy Morrison, our LCAP coordinator. It's our pleasure this evening to present the annual update on our LCAP plan. And hopefully tonight you'll get a sense of how we're using this existing framework to actually bring to life the equity, access, and social justice guiding principle within our district work. And so this evening's presentation is really going to have 4 broad themes, really speaking again to the integration of our LCAP site planning process and budgeting process, speaking to how we're using continuous improvement, really building on work that Kathy Morrison has led over the past few years and feedback from our LCAP PAC as well, and then a brief review of some of our district spending. The local plan and accountability plan goals basically break into 4 key attributes: college, career, life readiness, student engagement, family and community empowerment, and then operational excellence. And so you'll get a sense of some of the work underway in all 4 of those key goal areas. The process we're having tonight really is one of those annual processes where we take an opportunity to reflect on our LCAP plan. We'll have a review of where we are in terms of actions with the plan, and then we'll also give you a sense of how we've used a cycle of continuous improvement to really drive our reflection, to make overall, we think, improvements, both in terms of clarity about what's in the plan, and then also more opportunities for us to talk about how the LCAP budget and site planning process really are working together. And we're looking to pilot some new processes next school year to really drive home how we know that these kind of traditional artifacts in our system, when we create the points of intersection between them, can help us accelerate issues of equity, access, and social justice for our students. This just gives you a sense of some of the direction that our county office provides us, and you'll notice that we're basically following their timing in terms of presenting this an annual update at this time of year. Because as the county office has given us guidance on kind of various milestones, we've been very attuned to those milestones and use those as guideposts in our planning process. So in every presentation, we come back to our core value, and tonight's presentation certainly speaks to it as well in terms of really trying to think about how do we disrupt inequities and level the playing field for our students and community. And so we know that, the strength of the LCAP is that we get strong input from our LCAP PAC. We actually get strong input from our stakeholder groups. And so as we think about that feedback and think about our own processes with it, we've used that as an opportunity to really reflect on what can we do as a system in thinking through things along equity, access, and social justice. What can we do to make our LCAP budget and site planning process really integrated and come to life? And so again, we speak things through the filter or lens of our equity, access, and social justice guiding principle. But really tonight, one element of our equity, access, and social justice guiding principle we want to highlight is this notion of how do we use our LCAP as a way to enter conversations around downdrafting practices. And so one thing that we've identified is that there's an opportunity that as we think about the integration of the work that's already underway in our district, and we think about kind of the traditional way that we've done things, particularly as we think about budgeting, when we are intentional about infusing budgeting with an equity filter, what can that mean for our students and for the overall system? And so that's really the orientation for our conversation this evening. This graphic is really just to, again, reinforce kind of the words we've continued to talk about, that we know that separately, all of these artifacts are really important to the system, but ultimately it's our ability to bring them together in a meaningful way in which we're able to drive the budgeting process that really will allow our budgeting process to become an exemplar of what does equity, access, and social justice mean when we go into not just the tangible conversation about the theory behind it, but in practical sense, this is what it looks like, this is what it costs, these are the programs that become a direct result when we take that kind of perspective or planning stance. And so you've seen this as well before. The goal tonight is not to necessarily go back through it again, but it's again to show that as we think about the guiding principle, it really is about bringing together not just the artifacts we're talking about this evening, but bringing together the way in which we do work. And so increasingly going forward, you'll hear us talk about work within the framework of our guiding principle. And then this artifact is just meant to show that we're being intentional. So there's a lot to be said about the conversation in terms of what we're thinking of doing. This artifact here in terms of the dates is to show how we are actually intentionally thinking specifically about what steps are happening within our budget process, what steps are happening within our site planning process, and what steps are happening with our local control plan, and simply talking about how do we bring those dates together so that we're thinking about, and those highlights in yellow are where we see the intersection. The superintendent's talked about the notion within the theory of change about invasion of space. This is kind of a variation of that concept in terms of really being intentional about saying that our LCAP, our site planning process, and budget do not exist discretely, but that they actually have significant intersection between each other. And we're trying to be very intentional as we think about our planning process going forward to recognize and call those out. As I mentioned previously, and this really builds on the work that Kathy Morrison has led over the last few years, we've taken a continuous improvement stance. This has actually been coaching from our county office as well. And again, this is in response to feedback from our LCAP PAC, where we recognize that there's opportunities to be clearer about how funds are used, opportunities to be more explicit about how we measure outcomes. And so tonight's presentation is meant to give you a sense of how we're applying those lessons learned very explicitly in terms of our LCAP planning going forward, and using the annual update as an opportunity just to give you a summary of that. So this is an exemplar of just one of the tools that Kathy has used and has done some modification to in order to create an ability for us to get more concrete, specific, impactful information about how the LCAP is actually operationalized within our district. And this is meant to be a compare and contrast. And so, as we talk about the evolution of continuous improvement, one of the things that we've done in terms of our process of getting the annual update prepared this year is thinking through, what are ways that we can develop more impact statements. And so this is meant to just give a sense through our counseling work, a sense of more greater clarity that we know creates the conditions for our LCAP PAC to do a more rigorous review and oversight, but also gives us a chance as a system to be very reflective about, so what are the impacts that we're seeing? What are the opportunities? And this is meant just to be an artifact to give you a sense of how that strengthens us in that regard. But equally important, we recognize, and particularly our community members have been strong advocates of this, with the strength of the local control funding formula and knowing that that was a major policy statement by our state to declare targeted supports for students of specific subgroups, we've basically have said that in our LCAP, we want to be very intentional about declaring how are we spending those funds. And so we recognize that this, to some degree, becomes part of the new work, but as part of our continuous improvement journey. And so you see two indicators framed here. One that really speaks to where funds are being spent and to whom. And then the other one is really speaking to the fidelity of the spending of the funds. So the second indicator really gets to this notion of making sure that we identify cases where we may have unintentionally may not have optimized our spending, and so that we are able as a district to report that concretely and specifically. But equally important is to recognize that this is a shift in work, and so we've been starting a process with our fiscal team to really think through what are some of the processes required. And actually this will be big work for the whole system, because this will actually change some of the budgeting for our school sites as well in terms of how they report. And so a process, and as you think about the equity, access, social justice framework, this is a tradition, if you will, that we're going to reinvent to some degree in order to get greater clarity on our budgeting process. And so tonight I'll just give you a very brief sense of what the end game here entails. And so you see on this slide, our fiscal team has already started some of their brainstorming about how we'll change reporting, if you will, so that we can, particularly for next year's annual update, give a very concrete examples of how our LCF funds are being spent on our LCFF targeted students, but not just in a broad category. So I'll just bring attention to you in the second bullet there at the bottom with our English learner students. We've talked a lot about the notion of elements and sub-elements. And so one of the things we're looking to do in order to bring greater clarity to how our LCFF funds are being spent is really thinking through not just what we spend for our English learner students, but in this example, tying it specifically to the sub-elements that we're focusing our work on. And so this is just one example of what we're looking to do, is that you see the sub-element here. It is borderline redesignation within 365 days. What we want to do is be able to not just tell you we spent this amount of money specifically for English learner students, but we want to be able to say very specifically we spent this amount of money specifically earmarked supporting our students who are eligible for redesignation in that borderline category, and we converted them within a year. And so our goal here, and again, this is building on our strength of wanting to be clear, transparent in terms of how funds are spent, is really disaggregating in the context of our financials exactly how money is being spent. And then, of course, that would apply to the other sub-elements within the English learner category as well. And for example, you see a number there. The spring, we actually have designated about 450 or so students who were eligible for redesignation in that borderline pool, and we actually got them redesignated. And that's the kind of concrete data that we'd like to bring to you as we talk about the LCAP going forward, and that's part of our cycle of continuous improvement. With that, I'll actually turn it over to Kathy to take you through some of the macro numbers, and then we'll be available to answer questions.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent and board members. I'm Kathy Morrison. This will be relatively brief and high level. As this slide states, in the annual update, what we are explaining with the expenditures is the difference between what was budgeted and included in the LCAP and then the estimated actual expenditures. The timeline for the expenditures is year to date plus what is encumbered through the end of the year. I want to point out that we have not included site-based expenditures at this juncture because requisitions are not complete at this time. Our next milestone for that is at the end of April. They'll be included in the LCAP draft in May. So again, just reviewing the 4 goals, I'm going to take you through a couple of different views of our expenditures framed around these goals. This slide is summative. We have goals 1 through 4, and you can see what was planned or budgeted versus the estimated actual. And we've got some puts and takes, but really overall, big picture, we're on track. What you will notice at the very bottom is this is the first year we're reporting on Goal 4, which was added to the LCAP last year. This is our review now of Goal 1. And in this slide, we've broken out the macro number into 4 big funding sources. So we have our general funds, our supplemental and concentration dollars, which are those that are targeted to students who are low-income English learner or foster youth. We have our federal funds and then grant or other funds included. Within Goal 1, it's really our biggest bucket. It's our academic goal, and you will see funded in this goal are professional learning, career technical education, multilingual, counselors, librarians, and many other staff who are actually here tonight in support of the collaborative work that was put together in creating this annual update. Goal 2 is around safe, healthy, and engaged students. Same framework as far as the funding. In Goal 2, we cover things like facilities, positive school climate, staff that support safety, the Safe Haven Initiative, student support centers, just to name a few. In Goal 3, it's our family and community empowerment goal. We have our family engagement staff, the mock center that provides interpretation and translation, and home visits as our principal attributes of that goal. And then finally, operational excellence. There are no supplemental and concentration funds aligned to this goal, and what you see in terms of the planned Title I expenditure is a clerical error where one item was not included in the LCAP last year. So our timeline to wrap up, we are expecting that all of the school site plans will be completed by the end of April, and the actions and services get folded into the LCAP. Our first draft LCAP will be May 3rd, presented to the board, and we will reserve the month of May for extensive consultation and feedback with our stakeholders, with possible revision after the governor's May revise. Finally, you see public hearing in June and our projected LCAP and budget adoption June 21st. So again, this timeline is just a summary of the visual, and I'm going to be bringing us to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. Do we have questions or comments from board members? Oh, sorry, public comment.
We have 3 public comments. If you could line up when you hear your name. First is Liz Guillen, followed by Cecile Nunley, followed by Tony Tinker.
Good evening. I'm Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. Every year, this gets better, and I really think it's important to acknowledge that there is a lot of improvement, and this district has been a lot more transparent around how it allocates funding than most of the districts that many of my colleagues and allies work in and watch. Having said that, I know that you are trying to model continuous improvement, and I really appreciate that. I think one of the important things that the board should focus on is, especially as we move into the LCAP for next year's funding is the end of the LCFF implementation. And so we'll be at full funding. And as a result, it should be much more transparent what the proportion the district should be either spending or taking action around to increase or improve. In other words, the increase or improvement should be in proportion to the amount of funding that your unduplicated students brought into the district. And because you'll be at full funding, that percentage will be a lot clearer. Up to now, it's been confusing with the proportionality calculation that Gerardo and I have been struggling over the years. But it'll be clear to everyone, not just the district, but the public as well. I want to also suggest that you look at the total of the S&C, supplemental and concentration spending for all the goals, and ask, what is the actual increase or improvement that we got with this funding? And then finally, I've been saying this for a while, and I say it in the context of the graduation task force. The improvements or the recommendations coming out of there reflect and mirror quite a bit what has been planned in the LCAP. And I really think it's important, if there's going to be another plan, that there be a crosswalk, or within the LCAP, that there be some acknowledgement that this is part of graduation task force recommendation as well. So in one place, we can know what the actions and services that are being planned, where they all are in one place. I really like the fact that you can click onto a goal and go right to it. To me, that's a demonstration of some innovation that I wish other districts would do, so that we don't get so many complaints about how long this document is. That's just, it's to the beholder, right? Some of us really want all the information. Some only want information around goal 1 or goal 4. So I really liked that I didn't have to get the whole LCAP at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I appreciate your comments.
Good evening, members of the board. It's great to see all of you here. My name is Cecile Nunley. I'm with the LCAP Advisory, but I'm speaking right now just as myself, not as part of the advisory board. One of the things that I noticed, and I too echo Ms. Goulian's comments with regard, you guys are trying to make for more transparency, and I really do applaud that. However, I think it's on slide number 17, the fidelity indicator tracker where you're creating new resource codes, and I think that's great. I'd like to suggest that perhaps there can be some others added as well, and I know that would cause Geraldo some challenges, so I don't want to necessarily go there. But in particular, with regards to African American youth, because of the gap, the academic gap, and especially when it comes to suspensions and expulsions and the chronic absenteeism, that those are significant. In particular, whether it's African American or Latino, and I know I see Superintendent Aguilar nodding his head, if those are so significant that there's a problem there, and I believe the state even identified those as a problem, then what you measure and what you track is how you're defining your importance, how important it is. So I would ask respectfully that those be considered because it is so important. If the kids are not in school, they can't learn. And obviously if they're being suspended or it's the soft suspension where you better not come to school because if you come to school, we're going to have to suspend you. So you don't want a suspension on your record. So therefore, we're going to, just don't come to school. And then it shows up as chronic absenteeism. So you still have those problems. So it's something that I think you should consider. And I got 4 seconds. And the only other thing I was going to say was on the timeline. I just didn't see in the timeline where you're mentioning anything about the advisory committee.
Okay,
So,
wonderful. So thank you, Cecile. I appreciate it. We'll take questions and comments from board members at this time. Vincent. Oh, Tony. Didn't see you over there.
Patiently waiting. What do you say, Jose Aguilar? Impatiently waiting. I have been impatiently waiting on all of this. So I applaud you for your work that you are doing on the transparency and the work that it looks in LCFF. However, I mirror what Liz Guion said and what Cecile said. African Americans are not seen in this plan at all. They are the lowest performing students across the state. I have been traveling across the state and we are still the lowest performing. We need help, we need love, and we need to see ourselves reflected in this body because we are parents who have a great deal to say in this body. I sit on the LCAP PAC. Right now I'm talking to you as a parent, also as an educator that is working in this field, doing some work in this field. And I've been going and talking to parents, and to get them on board and to get them in an understanding, we need to train them on what this is, what an LCAP is, what LCFF is. We need to do a better job. We need to do a better job so that you can recruit more people like Cecile, like me, like Liz. And we're not in the timeline. As Cecile pointed out, we're not in that timeline. You're already deciding how this money is going to be spent, how we're moving along, and we're playing catch up. And while Kathy does an excellent job at helping us to get through that, our comments are often still a rubber stamp to this. The timeline to this needs to change. You need to have folks not coming off of this committee, but sustaining, Ametrius folks sustaining, so that we're not reinventing the wheel, so that we can bring some of these things forward so that as we present more and more of this, the dollars make sense. More narratives that make sense, more narratives that talk in the way that we talk in everyday world. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tony. Do we have any further public comment?
No more comments.
Okay, at this time, we'll take questions and comments from board members. I did want to ask Vincent, there was the question and strong suggestion by Cecile around slide 17 resource codes. And this in particular call out that, we have 3 very important targeted sub-elements, but that we probably could go even further. And in the light of student populations we know are least served, we should. And so can you talk a little bit about what the district is doing in the spirit of continuous improvement to move beyond the 3 identified sub-elements?
Oh, sure, and certainly those three were meant to be examples. But as we look throughout our prioritized
They're not
elements,
exhaustive.
they're not exhaustive, exactly. And so we have, third grade readiness, we have graduation. In each of our sub-elements, we have the ability to disaggregate by student group. And so we have definitely heard the message, and it's part of our whole equity access social justice guiding principle in terms of the power of disaggregation and using that as a way that whether we're talking about A through G completion, college going culture, or suspension or chronic absenteeism, we have the ability to continue disaggregating by student group so that we can write intentional plans specifically for students and see them and have them be visible. It's lower economic level as well. And so, whatever gender, whatever that disaggregated group that appears to be most challenged is what we're using the data to really unravel, to understand, to better penetrate solutions that are targeted specifically for students. But to your question, the example I gave tonight was not exhaustive. There's definitely other prioritized sub-elements that we're looking at and are definitely a part of our ongoing work with our principals, with our instructional area assistant superintendents, leading principals in terms of how to really look at the data from that perspective of where is the greatest need.
Thank you, Vincent. We have a comment from First Vice President Wu.
Thank you, President Ryan. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Just a couple comments. Moving to slide 18, which is the English learner outcomes. In the red box area, 35.59%. What does that mean?
So that's taking the pool of students, and roughly it's about a pool of about 1,100 or so students. And what it is communicating is this notion of we know students who are borderline in terms of being eligible for English learner redesignation. So either they have a CELT score, or in this context they have an SBAC score, but they don't have the corresponding CELT score yet. And so what that sub-element declares is to create a sense of urgency that if a student is at the cusp, if you will, of redesignation, we're basically giving ourselves an annual cycle, if you will, 365 days, to see how many of those students actually then got redesignated within 365 days. And so that's what that represents, as borderline students who were redesignated within 365 days, which again, back to the equity access social justice guiding principle, the notion of changing conditions in the present, we really want to give emphasis that we know, particularly as we think about long-term English learner students and frankly the redesignation process in general. It's really critical to recognize the value is redesignating as appropriately as possible. And so we don't want to make it seem like, you're borderline and we're just simply saying, okay, whenever you redesignate is fine. We're actually saying within 365 days, there's an expectation of redesignation.
So to carry forth from that question, my recollection of it's either the LCFF or the dashboard requires us to also identify, we take this money, we're going to target it to specific areas, and we're supposed to identify what outcomes we're going to expect in addition, so that next year when we look back to see how we spent the money, whether or not we had reached that target. So are those targets included in this in the outcomes portion or somewhere else in the LCAP report?
And I can't speak for last year yet, but this would be, to your question, this would be the basis for what we would include going forward. Exactly to your point, would be targets set for these types of indicators going forward.
It's not clear to me, so maybe greater differentiation or explanation can be provided. And then one last comment that I have is that maybe when you come before us again for the next presentation, you might share with us then what we are targeting for the African American community instead of English language learners, so that we can have a clearer idea. Thank you.
Thank you, First Vice President Wu. Do we have other questions or comments from board members? So I have a few comments and reflections that I want to share. I'm very excited to see the depth of the work that we're doing today compared to where we were when we began this LCAP process. And so I certainly want to applaud you for your effort to make this more transparent, to communicate in a more parent and community-friendly way, and to also provide deeper clarity on the money trail for targeted populations. I do very much, however, want to echo and underscore the comments of partners like Liz Guillen from Public Advocates and our community members such as Tony, because I believe that the comments that came about tonight are things that we should be taking into consideration as we craft our efforts moving forward. I, as a board member, I, as a parent of 2 children in the district, very much would like to be able to speak to how our investments are yielding returns. So Liz said, can we look at being able to draw a direct correlation between the investments made under each of these priority areas and some sort of improvement for our targeted student populations? I want to know that, because as a board member is faced to make difficult decisions with finite resources, we need to be able to better understand how we can see the dollars that we have yield impact, particularly for populations most traditionally left behind. And so I would love to hear, as you continue to work on this algorithm, how we account for that. I am excited by how this seems to go above and beyond what we are required to do, and allow through this resource code this tracking of dollars at a level that we haven't seen before. But I do very much underscore the request for having dedicated codes that speak to our African American students. And I know I was just speaking with the superintendent about state support for some legislation that would allow at a state level this work to happen, and I hope to see that move forward under Dr. Weber. But I do think beyond that, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, and I will speak to this in my president comments tonight, but I continue to be concerned, not just as a community member, but as a parent of African American children, that we are not doing enough to be intentional, strategic, and call out our efforts to serve that community. And to the extent that we could provide resource codes that allow us to track that in a very transparent way, but not just to track that, to say in a statement of our values, since budgets are a statement of our values, we are making these strategic investments, not as part of other categories that we're investing in, but because this population is being currently failed. And I would like to see this become a top priority as we move forward. And then finally, my question is around communication of the LCAP plans and the improvements that have been made. I know that, a great deal has been done to change, modify, and improve the LCAP plan process based upon input from PAC members. How are you sharing that with the community? Because I think that it's important that we acknowledge that we have taken feedback, directly used that to help us make the necessary modifications, and are going to continue to solicit feedback that will then be the basis for our work moving forward.
I think we're still at the front end. I'll defer to Kathy if there's anything that we've already done, but I think we're still developing the plan for actually how to share all of the changes that we've made just in this annual update right now.
So Kathy, please feel free to answer. I do want to say, I have more than 10 years in education policy, and I find the language very wonky. I know the LCAP process, even as someone who has 10 years of experience in education policy, is difficult to understand and navigate. And we have to do a better job communicating in a culturally responsive and relevant way this information, because this, even through the various iterations, is insufficient to really be something that parents could feel empowered by.
So I think part of your question was around communicating how we have used the recommendations of the Parent Advisory Committee, and that is memorialized within the LCAP in a section called Stakeholder Engagement. And our plan will be better and better when we can say, this is what we heard and this is how it's reflected in the plan. That's the ultimate goal. Communicating the LCAP to the community, I think, is just something that's always on the front of my mind as well. And working with Alex, we've had some coaching on language, and I will continue to keep your comments in mind about language for sure.
We have a final comment from Board Member Pritchett.
Thank you, President Ryan. Thank you both for this. I, from the years I've sat on this board and watching this evolve over time, I agree that with Ms. Guillen that it gets better and better. And I thank you for being open to changes. And I think that as we keep on going, we're just going to keep getting better. I have a question about the LCAP committee members, the board-appointed LCAP committee members. Can you tell us when their deadline is, or when their term is up, I should say?
So currently, each board member and the superintendent have 2 members, and all the terms right now end June 30th with the fiscal year. We have been in, pardon me?
This year.
Yes. So we've been in discussion about staggered terms. Nothing is final, but it is something that needs to be considered, I think.
And what are we doing about possibly retaining members? Do we have a plan for that?
I think we'll look for the board's advice on that.
All right, that's fair enough. Can you, is it a possibility that you can reach out to each board member and kind of give them a report of each of their appointees? And like for me, I know I'd be interested in knowing like the attendance of my members because I'm not attending these. I'd like to know if they're going to each meeting, and just your guys' take on it. That would be very helpful for me.
So
thank
I
you.
can provide that.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
It looks like we thank you, Board Member Pritchett. It looks like we have one last late comment from Board Member Hanson.
Yes, one last comment, just to remind every board member that it's up to us who we want to appoint, so we can do our own staggered terms. So, for instance, I appoint my members for 2-year terms. I could extend that an additional year if I thought it was in the best interest of the LCAP committee. So, just so we all understand, that's under our control.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson.
President Ryan, if I may,
Yes.
I've been thinking about your question, and there is some new work that we've just started. So it doesn't give you the full context about how we have communicated, but we've just started a process, and we've got a small group of community organizations where actually next week we're going to start thinking through shared co-curriculum, co-created professional learning sessions about equitable budgeting. And so what we're hoping through that, while it's not going to necessarily be specifically like the LCAP, if you will, but it will speak to our performance and target action index. It will speak to the elements and sub-elements. Our goal, I think, to your point completely, will be how do we create language, how do we create curriculum that is accessible to all of our stakeholders? And so I think by the fall, we definitely can give you a more robust answer in terms of at least this being a pilot of doing some of what you asked about.
Wonderful. Well, I hope to be invited to one of those sessions, and I'm glad to hear that you'll be doing that. Thank you both. Item 8.2, approving Resolution 2997, Notice of Layoff Classified Employees.
Board President Ryan, members of the board, Superintendent Aguilar. I'm Concy McCarn, Chief Human Resource Officer, and with me is Cindy Nguyen, Employee Relations Director. We are here, unfortunately, to talk about a notice of layoff for classified employees. This reduction in force due to a lack of funds, lack of work is always a difficult thing to bring forward. The district employees are dedicated employees, certainly all of our employees are, and this we recognize is a difficult decision before you. We will say that a number of these are grant-funded positions, and as you know, sometimes the grant funds go only for a year at a time. Once and if those grant funds return, we're able to return and restore positions. Sites and departments, for the most part, went through a one-stop staffing process where they met with their instructional assistant superintendent or administrator, budget department, human resources, after having had conversations with their school site councils in terms of need based on what was budgeted. This data the district takes a look at both the site data and the department data, because some positions that we have are through central office and some is through site, although they may have the same title. So it's important to look at those collectively. And given where we are, again, some of these funded by grants that go year to year, we are in a position at this time, because of ed code requirements, we need to provide employees with a certain amount of notice to be able to effectuate a reduction. We can, at any time later, once funds are identified, pull that back and restore the positions. But in order to meet the timelines, we're bringing this before you at this board meeting. This is very tiny, but you have the attachment, the Exhibit A. Cindy is going to talk a little bit about some of those positions and differentiate which of those are being closed for lack of funds and the ones towards the bottom, the last page and a half, for just because they're vacant. They're vacant positions that need to be closed, meaning not a person will receive a notice.
Good evening. I will just briefly go over those exhibits in case there's questions afterwards. But we separated out the exhibits by department, so you will see all of the departments that are funding these positions. And again, like Kansi had said, a lot of these positions are grant funded or categorically funded. You will also notice that we also have our classified management as well listed by the departments. And then separated from the departments are school sites and school site funded positions, whether that be categorical or grant funded. There are some program changes at the school site level as well that is included in these reductions. And on the last page of the exhibit, to the extent possible, we closed vacant positions, and it lists department and school site positions that are funded. And at the very end of the summary is the grand total, including all of our vacant positions to be closed. I will also note that some of these positions have been vacant since last year and needed to also be cleaned up as well because it wasn't going to be staffed or filled. And so the grand total FTE for reductions is 67.368.
What I'll add to that is part of the system cleanup to make sure that when we run reports, the reports are actually reporting the positions that are there. So some of those vacant are not just positions that it's been difficult for the district to fill, but positions that have moved previously and just didn't get closed out. So this is the process in which the district has to do that. So as you can see, the majority of these are vacant positions. We realize again that it is a difficult decision and there are people behind each and every one of these FTEs and lines. At the same time as determined by Ed Code guidelines and for the district to remain fiscally solvent until funding can be identified. If funding can be identified, staff recommends approval of this resolution.
Do we have any public comment?
We have one public comment from Cecile Nunley.
Good evening again. It's just one really quick question, and that is just nowhere on here, unless I'm missing it, and I went through the resolution as well as the agenda item, the presentation as well as the exhibit, and I didn't see where there were any dollar amounts. And that's the only thing that is kind of missing here. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to know, and I know even on some of these positions, and I'm sure especially if they're vacant, you don't know the exact dollar amount, but you can kind of estimate or go for the middle salary range. estimate, a single health plan, those types of thing, just to kind of give an estimate. But without having anything, it's just kind of difficult. So that was my only comment.
Thank you, Cecile. That's a good comment and suggestion. I know I would find it helpful as a board member to have that as an additional column. Questions and comments from board members. First, Board Member Hanson, followed by Board Member Pritchett.
Thank you, and Cecile, I think that's a good suggestion, and it would be helpful to know the dollar amounts that we're talking about. It'd also be helpful to understand what the letters are that are underneath work months. I don't really see, I'm sure there's a rhyme or a reason, but there's no guide, so I don't understand what a J, an H, an M, a G2, those are kind of meaningless to me, so maybe you can add a glossary for us. Then my specific question is about William Land. As you know, it's a school with a Mandarin immersion program. It's an extraordinarily popular program. We could probably add an extra 100 students if we had the ability to house more students there. So that certainly seems like one of the last places we should want to cut staffing because, one, it's extraordinarily difficult to find Mandarin teachers and assistants. And it's just on a fiscal side, it generates far more money than it costs us because it's such a popular program. What are we looking at with the two Mandarin teachers assistants?
Well, first, the work months, the 10, 11, 12 specifically just speaks if they're 10, 11, or 12-month employees. We certainly will in the future add something that makes that really clear so people don't have to guess or assume, as well as the dollar column. Great suggestion. In terms of William Land, I know it has been very difficult, and we've worked hard, although we're in a good place now compared to where we were a couple of years ago with the recruitment efforts for the Mandarin to have that program fully staffed. These two specific positions were funded out of the multilingual department on a grant that ended. So we are still with those two positions particularly, but other positions as well, looking for additional funding to be able to maintain and keep those going. But because we are at a point where it hasn't yet been identified as of today, the notices, or at least the approval, hopefully we're still able to have something happen before we actually have to deliver the notices, happens, we're bringing it forward to you, but it is absolutely our intent with those two positions and a number of other of our teacher assistant bilingual, regardless of whether it is Mandarin or Spanish or Hmong or whatever it is, maintain those. Because one of the other things that we're working to do, as you know, is build our pipeline through our classified employees. So we know it certainly helps with recruitment when we're able to maintain those pools, but we're at a place where, because funding wasn't identified, this is the next step, but we're still working to identify funding.
As we have our budget meeting is in 2 weeks for our from this board meeting, and maybe that might be something that we ask to see at the budget meeting to get an assessment of where we're at, and then the dollar amounts that we're discussing could help us inform our decision making. Obviously, hopefully we can identify funding, but I think that'd be important for us to have an ability to reflect on. Thank you.
Board Member Pritchett.
Thank you. I just have one clarifying question. Can you tell me what a walking attendant is?
Certainly, it's an employee who walks with students to school as opposed to having buses.
Oh, it really was that simple. Okay, I just wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah,
okay.
Crossing the streets and walking to and from. Certainly, when school closed, we increased those positions and the home transportation.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Board Member Minnick.
Thank you. A couple things. One, I want to thank you for clarifying the stuff around the vacant positions. It sounds like for a lot of these categories were placeholders for positions that we didn't necessarily have an intent on filling. And so by kind of taking them off the books, It gives us a more realistic view of our vacant positions, so it doesn't look like we have all these vacant positions that we were just unable to fill. So I appreciate you cleaning that up, or at least that we're going through this process of cleaning up. And then one question I have on page 1 of the exhibit, there's a lot of child development positions on this list. And so I wanted to find out, are those, or are a majority of those grant funded? And if so, what kind of grant, and what's our expectation, if it is, of filling that? If you could kind of clarify that, because I just see this as something that could be super painful to our early education programs.
Sure. So I think that there are a number of things happening in here, and Gerardo can jump in if he would like. One of the things happening is that we know that some of the grants child development received were reduced, so not eliminated, but just getting less of. For example, around the home visitor pieces. Some of the positions in here, there are employees who no longer qualify for the position that it's in, and so there is a little bit of shifting and moving that's happening, or that individuals might be surplused into other positions.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but while you're on that one, can you tell me what you mean by positions that employees no longer qualified for?
As the grant funding has changed, it's required different levels of education, let's say, right? From needing to have an associate's degree or more. And so while employees are working on that, there are other positions that they qualify for fully that we're able to put them in.
And I cut you off when you were talking about
the
potential for whatever these grants could be. That
yes, but I do know that also the department did need to reduce. There were some of the grant funding that they were expecting didn't come in as high as it had in the past. So that's another reason that some of those are in there.
And is there a portion of these that are potential to be reinstated or saved if funding goes through, or are these all positions that we're not waiting on a grant to come through? Like, are these all going to be cut for sure?
I don't know if they are all. I would say probably the majority. But I do know at this time there isn't funding that's identified to be able to keep them going. And given the lack of funds, there's some shifting that needs to happen within the department.
Thanks.
First Vice President Wu.
Thank you, President Ryan. So, Consi, just as a matter of course, in the past few years, when we've approved these layoffs, how many, on average, have not been laid off or been rehired back? Just as comfort for my colleagues.
Yeah. Do you have a better sense of that, maybe?
If I had to average it out over a trend of maybe 3 years, because we have to go through this process that's contractual and bounded by Ed Code, they may not be in the same capacity that they are right now, but they may have rights to a different capacity. So are they unemployed and laid off completely? Not necessarily. They may not be 100% in the capacity that they are now. So if I had to average it out over the past 3 years of who actually is unemployed with no rights, pending a vacancy or funding when it returns, is probably less than half or less than that, given the numbers of how this ends up looking from year to year, because the resolutions are always different. But definitely more than half.
Well,
less than half, sorry, less than half.
That provides a little bit of comfort. Thank you for this difficult decision we have to make. So one other comment that I have, or question that I have, is the explanation, it's due to a lack of secured funding source and program changes, so we can be assured that none of these layoffs or none of these layoffs come from any of the supplemental concentration grants that we're getting from the state.
There's not reductions in supplemental and concentration, so that's correct.
Thank you.
So, Kansi, I had a couple questions. I'm concerned looking at some of the proposed layoffs that really are, in the form of Hiram Johnson, family advocate, and I'd like to know more about that. Looking at the youth and family mental health advocate full-time position, looking at 2 full-time or close to full-time school community liaisons, 1 full-time parent advisor. I mean, these seem to be critical supports that help lift up student achievement. And so I'd like you to speak a bit about that. And then I have some questions about the child development positions as well.
Certainly. So given what the information that sites receive around their budget allocations, they engage with their school site communities to decide based on what it is that they are identified as having to reduce, what that looks like. And in some cases, there are other positions that they're able to open up knowing that this one is closed. If there are specific ones, you mentioned a number of the Hiram Johnson ones and certainly ones within the support services realm, can definitely follow up on specific individuals so that you have a better sense.
I would appreciate that. I have to say, I understand that we have a limited pool of resources to work with and that we have to make cuts. But I also feel pretty strongly that we should be investing in mental health and student support services, not disinvesting, and that it shouldn't require a parcel tax to do so, because that is, in fact, tantamount to student success. So that concerns me. And the 16 child development positions, I appreciate Board Member Minnick, Vice President Minnick's comments and questions around that. So there are 16, that doesn't include the 5 vacant positions. And the 16 positions that are listed out aren't assigned sites. What sites are impacted by this reduction of 16 child development specialists?
I don't have that here tonight, but I can definitely provide that information.
Okay. So I will just say, I would like with these, I understand that we have district positions, that they are technically in the central offices, but I feel very uncomfortable approving layoffs if I don't even know what sites are impacted by them, even though they're technically under the umbrella of the central offices. And so, as a point for future reference, I think that that's absolutely essential to being able to make informed decisions. And I appreciate Board Member Wu's comment about 50% of the potential layoffs not actually materializing, but that's cold comfort as well. And so the child development, I know that I had an opportunity to speak a bit about this with the superintendent. Can you share a bit more about the programs that are likely to be impacted?
Well, what we can share is that, I think what would be most appropriate, because we would only be able to share very surface level information and you're wanting something deeper and more specific, is to be able to have individuals working specifically in and with the departments answer the questions. Sorry.
And you have to have this approved by when?
The next board meeting would be too late because we have to notice employees and provide them with ample time to make decisions, such as if they want to voluntarily reduce or if they want to accept other positions, and that they can legitimately bump into based on positions they've held in the past. So this is the very last board meeting that we could bring it. we waited as long as we could to hoping and seeing if there would be additional funding that would be identified. And I will say the list has decreased from what it was originally, but this is the last board meeting.
So thank you for that additional information. It looks like we have a question from Board Member Vang.
So Concy and Cindy, thank you so much for the presentation. I do echo Cecilia as well, and I really want to thank her for the addition to the presentation. I think next time, I think having a dollar amount would be helpful. I did have a question regarding Hiram Johnson, John Still, and Parkway, in particular because they received the SIG grants. And given, I know that for John Still and Parkway, I see that's under vacant position, but for Hiram Johnson, I know that, hold on, if I take a look at it, it's not under vacant. I'm interested to know if there's been conversation at the site level, just if these positions, if the SIG grant can also be tapped to fulfill some of these positions. So I'm just curious if that conversation has happened, because I know it's $5 million for each of the school sites, and I know Hiram Johnson, John Still, and Parkway fall within the SIG. They're the schools that receive the SIG grant. So I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, I know that as sites work with their site communities with regards to additional funding, there's an approval process that they have to go through to use SIG dollars. They are supposed to make that recommendation, submit their proposal, and if there are any changes to that proposal, which a number of schools have had changes to the proposal, then they have to go through the new process as well, and that takes time to approve.
So that's helpful. So if school community wanted to reinstate this under the SIG grant, they could do that as well.
I mean, they would have to go through the process of engaging their community and the site, school site council, going through that and then submitting it. We have somebody at the district office who assists with taking those forward to ensure that they are appropriately vetted and eventually approved or not approved, and then the district can move forward based on that.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions from board members? Okay. With that, I'm going to entertain a motion. Before I entertain the motion, I'm going to actually be abstaining from this vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And I'm abstaining. Thank you. Moving on to item 9.0, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Item 10.0, communications. 10.1, employee organizational reports. SCTA. Followed by SEIU.
Good evening. I'm David Fisher, President of Sacramento City Teachers Association. There are a lot of great things happening in the district, and we're excited to work with the district on a number of them, including, but not limited to, adopting the new ELA curriculum, eliminating unnecessary testing, developing more competitive salary schedule, and more. Just this week, we received our first comprehensive update from the California Education Coalition for Healthcare Reform, commonly referred to as CHECR. We are very encouraged about the serious possibilities to maintain health benefits at lower costs, providing additional resources to significantly reduce class sizes and increase student professional supports. Unfortunately, we continue to be distressed by many of the district's practices. As we reported last time, the number of administrators in the district from 2014 to the present has increased by 42%, while the credentialed staff number has only increased by 13%. This year alone, the number of administrators increased by 18.8 FTE. That's an increase of 7.4%, while the increase of the certificated staff was only 2.8%. continuing the trend of hiring 3 to 4 times more administrative than certificated staff. The source of this information is your own second interim, where I have it here if you're interested, where it shows the growth from 2015 of 190 administrators until this year of 269, and it shows the small growth of certificated staff of just a few dozen, even though we make up a bigger part of the bargaining unit of the district. So speaking of equity budgeting, I think that's something that you should take very seriously. Additionally, we are extremely dismayed by the district's refusal to address the growing crisis at CK McClatchy. Rather than address the core issues that led to the student walkout on March 21st, for example, the district chose to retaliate against 5 faculty members who have been the strongest advocates for students and for teachers. Faculty has been raising concerns about McClatchy since at least February of 2016, to no avail. We have responded to this most recent retaliatory attack on educators by filing, unfortunately, yet another unfair labor practice charge against the district with California Public Employee Relations Board. And we received a response from the superintendent just today that he is willing to meet directly with teachers to intervene. There's too much important work for us to do to allow this kind of retaliatory behavior to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, David. SEIU. TCS. Teamsters. UPE. Moving on to item 10.2, District Parent Advisory Committees, Community Advisory Committee.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angie Sutherland. I'm the chair of the Community Advisory Committee. We have several positions open on our executive committee: chair, vice chair, secretary, parliamentarian, and 2 member-at-larges. That's a lot of vacancies. I think the CAC is at risk of not having members to carry out the duties. So we invite you to please help us, invite the district and all the schools to please get parents to come to our April 24th meeting. They can submit nominations to Angel Garcia at cacscusd@gmail.com, or they can come to the meeting, or the May 22nd meeting will be the election, and they can come there and nominate there as well. We also have put in a request for additional logistical support that's similar to the other district committees, like DLAC and the PAC. We want a person assigned that can be at those meetings and not just provide information to our questions, but also that can follow up and set up the room and have food there for the families, like at the other meetings, like the graduation task force, this board meeting. We don't usually have any food for the children or the families. Becky did help us out on that because we did submit a request to her, but it was not any, it's cookies. So it would be nice since we're there, also volunteering time, and people don't have time to make dinner before they come to those. So we requested also like translation of our meeting minutes and our agendas, so that parents can see what we're talking about and not just see our brochure, but then know what we're doing. So we're waiting to hear back on all of our requests. This is going to be critical for the new group that comes in to take over. Also, the ELA curriculum, I think it was adopted. We wanted to make sure that it works well to support students' accommodations. And also we heard that the district may be exploring a multi-sensory curriculum for reading intervention, and we would like the CAC to be involved in that. Lastly, just want to remind everyone that the special education audit, there's the 1-year anniversary, is coming up in May, and we're still eagerly awaiting any fruitful action to address the many significant issues found. To date, nothing significant has been reported in terms of implementation. We're trying to be patient, but we feel like we're not being listened to. It's difficult for us to relate to what the issues are to what the current district efforts are. We don't see students with disabilities included. It's very distressing. We have made several attempts to work with the district and obtain information and made suggestions, which are outlined in your handout. We just want to know, is the board and the superintendent going to honor our requests for transparency and equity? We feel that this is owed to the community. A lot of effort went into the audit. A lot of good information came out of the audit. We want a full presentation on the implementation of the audit. I think the board meeting should have that. There has been nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. I would like to request that we have a presentation in May with a update on the work that has been done post-audit. I would also like to make a request of Superintendent Aguilar and the staff that the board receive a response to the requests that have been made of CAC, including food, staff, and translation services. And finally, if you can get us, Angie, something that we can share through social media, I think each of us can commit to sharing the postings so that hopefully we can help drive some CAC membership. Thank you. Looks like we have a comment from Board Member Hanson.
Thank you, Angie, once again for your tireless work. I mean, it's really remarkable. I too would, I echo President Ryan's request to our staff to get a better understanding of what our needs are to support the CAC. And I'd like that also to be brought to the Budget Committee next Thursday. Maybe we can discuss what the, it seems like a pretty slight cost, something like, the extra supports for the committee that is similar to what we provide for other committees, including food. I think that is something that's very reasonable and something that little things like that can help go a long way towards supporting committees like that. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next committee report is the District English Learner Advisory Committee.
Of Alliance. I am currently a CAC member, and this is my public comment. I'm supposed to be 10.2. I don't know if that's you. I filled out my yellow card.
You're 10.2 for
public comment. I gave it to Mr. Radio over there.
Jerry, do we do public comment on report backs by individual committees?
If there are reports, you can invite public comment. They can comment on reports.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't think we've had that happen before. Please.
Okay. Well, my comment is my son has autism and special needs, and he was a former employer student of John Cabrillo in a special day class. Because they were not meeting his needs, I pulled him out and put him in St. Patrick's. I implore you, please, to reevaluate your programs. The teachers are phenomenal, but to reevaluate programs, more specifically the aides to work in the classroom. I asked for a behavior assessment and I was denied. And because of that, I didn't feel like his needs would be met in a mainstream first grade classroom. So I pulled him where our insurance is now paying for an aide. That should not be the case. We live right in back of Sutterville Elementary, which by and large is a good school, but his needs won't be met there because it's too chaotic, and he was not afforded an opportunity to have an aide paid for by the district. So it's unfortunate. I would like him to be on par with his peers, but socially and emotionally, he can't without support. Hence the need to put him in a public setting. And there are a few parents in this district that had to do that for those same reasons. So I implore you to really look and evaluate what you're doing and how your resources are spent, and what you have in place to see where the money is going, and if the programs you do have in place, like for special needs kids, more specifically for the AIDS, if they're really doing what they're supposed to be doing, because I just didn't see it. I'm a former educator myself out of Pennsylvania, so I know what to look for, and when I didn't see my son's needs being met, I had to explore other avenues, and here we are.
Thank you. I
You're
appreciate your
welcome.
comments.
Sure.
And is this another public comment on the CAC? Okay.
Yes. Good evening, members of the board and Mr. Ligad. It's been a while since I've spoken. I've been busy. As you know, the economy is a little rough, and I think it's only going to continue to be a little bit rough in the next couple of years. And I think I was glad the fact that you're talking about layoffs. I think it's just the beginning. And as a parent, I have always come off and on for the past 10 years, and I will continue to come on off and on and talk about the same thing and say, you know, this is what I was telling you guys about. As for myself, I'm preparing myself, you know, in different ways, because when it does hit, it'll affect all of us in different ways. But today I come because I think I volunteer a lot, and I also donate a lot of money to the schools. But unfortunately, this past couple of months, I had to donate to an attorney to help me to advocate to stay for my son to stay at his school. All he wants to do is to be there. You know, I don't need to be jumping hoops and hire someone to just have his simple rights of being there. I wasn't asking for academics. I was asking for him to be there and be part of it. You know, it's so funny when people talk about budgets, you know, you kind of allocate. I said, okay, this year instead of donating the money, unfortunately I have to hire an attorney. You know, you don't want to do that. And I think this is what's happening throughout our economy is planning. You know, I think in the next future, you know, for our kids, I think one of the problems our society is having is a lack of education for California. We don't have enough people educated. And this is going to impact all of us. And like, again, focus on education, you know, get our priorities, and we need to work together. Because if we don't, similar situations going to happen. And again, like I always come in here, and I know the public because a lot of people come up to me and tell me what they sometimes can't say publicly, but say it. You know what, it's only a matter of time. And our budget is going to be affected, especially the unfunded liabilities that continue to rise. Thank you.
Grace. No more public comments on this item?
No other public comments.
Thank you, Alex. The District English Learner Advisory Committee, do we have a representative? No. The Local Control Accountability Plan, PAC, Cecile?
Evening again, and it's still early, right? I got time. All right. Well, this time I am in the capacity of speaking for the Local Control Accountability Plan Parent Advisory Committee. In response to Board Member Pritchett, I do want to report, maybe this should be something that's reported every time, out of the 13 members, we had 6 that were present at the last meeting. It was a rescheduled meeting, Kathy reminded me, but we did have 6 of 13. We also did have a guest, Nathaniel Browning, and we also had Maria Flores, who is an officer with the DLAC. So like they did last year, they're going to start inviting the DLAC to attend our meetings. Mr. Browning did a very good presentation on customer service, which was part of the LCAP goal for number 4, operational excellence. And he presented a form that is now going to start being rolled out as far as if there are any complaints district-wide, that they will be received. We did have some questions and some comments about the form. One was, how was the district going to educate the community? how would they define success in resolving complaints? And then one that was really clear, we wondered about, because the complaints were categorized, if it were someone complaining about racism. I know that in another district, I haven't seen it in the news as much for this district, but I know in another district that is within Sacramento County, there were complaints of students being hearing racial slurs and that type of thing. And rather than just lumped all into bully, could it be separated out so that that type of thing could be addressed a little bit more fully? But overall, the other question that we had with that was with the rolling out of the training and making sure all staff were appropriately trained, would it be something that staff could opt out, or would it be,
Mandatory.
no, you have to go to this training so that you're raising the level of quality of service to everyone? We also had a presentation on our SIPSA review from Ms. Lisa Hayes, and she did a very good job of talking about the school site councils. However, there still seemed to be a need for training, is what was expressed, and perhaps maybe having training even on budget committee items, and that the members needed to stagger a little bit more and repeat, because if you're constantly having new, then you don't have that historical institutional history going forward. And I did want to, a couple of things. I know I'm running out of time, I'm sorry. Assembly Bill 2635, I did want to mention. And what that particular bill is, it's a bill that is going before the state, and it's talking about adding the lowest performing group as the subgroup that would get additional funding, that districts would receive additional funding for. And that's deliberately to close that achievement gap. And so we hope that the district will support that and consider that going forward. And then possibly looking at the timeline for the LCAP, I did want to mention one last thing. Sorry, I'm going over. One last thing was just maybe on some of the training, or maybe with that LCAP process, if we could start it a little bit earlier in the year, because it's already April and we're seeing certain things. And yes, we've been meeting, but where we can really have input, it would just help if we could start a little bit earlier.
Thank you. I appreciate those thoughtful suggestions. Item 10.3, Superintendent's Report. Your mic's not working.
And turn it on. Other button.
Thank you, President Ryan. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back after a well-deserved spring break. I hope all of you were able to enjoy time with family and loved ones. This past week was also a time when many of us reflected on our own traditions and beliefs during Passover for some and Easter for others. Both celebrations are a time to find hope and strength during hardship and pain, to embrace our neighbor and welcome our strangers. Sadly, our city is going through such a difficult time right now because of the fatal shooting of Stephon Clark and the resulting protests. We extend our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Mr. Clark, and understand that the city's unrest is a symptom of the inequities and the racism we have seen throughout and more recently in our city streets. Yet, despite the grief, anger, cynicism, and other strong emotions at this time, Sacramento is coming together without resorting to further violence, and we can find hope in that. For students and staff who need support, please remember that our district offers a number of extra support services at our 27 student support centers and throughout our Connect centers. Please contact the site administrator or the student support center at your campus if you know of a student who needs additional supports. This week, as you know, we commemorated the 50th anniversary of a horrific and racist act, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis, Tennessee. In announcing Dr. King's death at a rally for his presidential campaign in Indianapolis, Robert F. Kennedy addressed the crowd, and he too was to be assassinated only 2 months later. Mr. Kennedy abandoned his prepared remarks to address the pain and anger of the crowd, and he said then that the country needed a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, and his words remain true half a century later. One critical way to combat the larger problem of injustice and racism is to address the educational inequities that contribute to our own racial economic disparities 50 years later here in Sacramento. That is why the Board of Education and I are committed to working closely with Mayor Steinberg and dozens of community-based organizations to deal with the system of inequities we see in our classrooms. We're already working to build, maintain, and increase a diverse pool of students for our high school specialty programs, and one element of that involves and will involve disrupting what's known as summer loss. We know that income-based reading gaps grow over the summer and are manifested at the start of every school year. So soon we will be implementing an expanded learning summer program to increase the grade level readiness of thousands of students in our district who, without appropriate interventions, would fall through the cracks of our K-12 system. On another topic, we're also continuing our commitment to ensure a safe haven commitment. This morning, members Ryan, member Vang, Mayor Steinberg, and I joined with the Fuel Network and the California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation to train approximately 100 staff members on how we can support our unprotected students and families. Staff included members of our counseling, youth services, student support, parent, and other departments who regularly engage with students and families, and it's just the first of many to come. Our Board of Education and I take seriously our commitment to ensuring we have a safe and welcoming learning environment for all of our students, families, and staff. And part of ensuring the environment and culture all across our district means making sure we communicate in the languages that our families speak. I had the pleasure of visiting with our translation unit, the Mock Center, before the break to thank them for their work in interpreting and translating meetings and documents. They're a small staff, but do mighty work. Also wanted to share with them that they will have more work as we do more outreach to our students and our community about available services and helping them communicate to us their needs. Finally, I'm pleased to announce that we're working with the Sacramento Public Library to provide new resources for students. This will give them a way to access free online homework help, borrow ebooks, access language learning software, and find practice tests for college entrance exams and other services. Students will be able to use their student identification number to take advantage of this new help. Details will be going out to our schools and students soon. All K-12 students will be able to use the free service and assistance. I truly appreciate what this new support will mean for our students. Thank you, Sacramento Public Library, and Amanda Turkey, who was here earlier, our district librarian, for working on this partnership. Thank you, President Ryan.
Thank you for the update, Superintendent Aguilar. Item 10.4, President's Report. It would be disingenuous to go about the business of the school board meeting without acknowledging the anguish that so many in our community are feeling over the death of Stephen Clark. The fatal shooting of this unarmed Black man has unearthed a depth of pain in our community that cannot be discounted. Community members that have felt targeted, unwelcomed, undervalued, and marginalized are demanding that their voices be heard. I have spent many nights wondering about the future of my own son, a Black boy trying to navigate a society in which he is 10 times more likely to die from gun violence and has a far greater chance of being incarcerated than attending an elite college or earning a top income. What we do in response and with what urgency will be a direct reflection of our character and our commitment to serve these students. I'm happy that the superintendent and board members have taken some significant steps, such as convening our African American community leaders 2 weeks before to talk about the historical perspective on race relations within the district and how we courageously confront inequities, as well as taking some tangible steps to develop a long-range plan to close opportunity gaps. Most recently, the superintendent, working with staff, has begun to distribute a toolkit, which he spoke to tonight, that would provide resources to students and families in trauma. I know that the superintendent also spoke about the anniversary, the commemoration of Dr. King's assassination. And I think it's appropriate at a time when we hear so much pain in the voices of so many, including those who came out tonight, in which Dr. King reminded us that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Our actions, our expeditious actions, show our demonstrated commitment to love and valuing the community that has experienced systemic inequities for far too long. I sincerely hope that the board and superintendent will join me in committing to swift action, including the formation of a dedicated African American Achievement Initiative. And I look forward to working in partnership with our community to actualize this in the weeks ahead. I also just want to speak, since we heard from several parents tonight, including some of our best parent advocates in our special education community, that they have felt that the system has failed their children, as we've heard from so many. I believe in the public school system. I believe in the ability to take a poor child like myself from a household with a struggling single welfare mother, despite going to 8 different schools, and put me on a path to college and a meaningful career. But I know that that system does not work equally for all students. We have to have a district that works for all students, not just those fortunate few who are the easiest to serve. I believe that we have the leadership in place to take those necessary steps. But as we talk time and again about a system that is inequitable by design, we have to show through clear action and a roadmap the steps that we will be taking to serve the populations that are being failed today. Thank you. With that, item 10.5, our student board member report.
Spring break is finished, so the Student Advisory Council is getting back into it. We're working on the distribution and approval of our surveys about specialty programs and mental health, and once we receive those back, we're going to be looking forward to going through that and analyzing the data.
Thank you. Item 10.6, information sharing by board members. First, we have Board Member Wu.
Thank you, President Ryan. I just want to share with my colleagues that today I was informed by through my CSBA contacts that Camellia, Phoebe Hurst, and William Land were awarded the Outstanding Schools for 2018 from the California Department of Education. I want to say that the judging this past Monday for the Art of Kindness went wonderfully, and I look forward to having them displayed here in the district. I think it's next week, next Friday. And then, and I want to thank all my colleagues for contributing to prizes for the schools and for the students. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised when you show up on the 20th, I believe it is. Then I want to share also that the last the day after the last board meeting and for the 4 days thereafter, I was in Washington, D.C. lobbying, participating in the Council of Great City Schools Ledge and Policy Conference, where we beat the doors down on the Hill, and proud to say that the 5% reduction in federal education funding was turned down by Congress. We will be getting a little bit more. Part of that funding reduction included total elimination of Title II funding, which includes addressing the teacher recruitment and training. So I'm glad that we have that back. And we have been restored funds for Century 21. So hopefully our school district will benefit in that. Thank you.
Thank you, First Vice President Wu. Board Member Hanson.
Thank you very much. A couple interesting, projects. I want to just thank the district and our students for their participation in the orderly walkout that we had in support of looking and examining gun violence in our schools. You know, after attending several of the student government meetings at McClatchy, it really is a serious problem and something that students actually think about. I couldn't imagine that at the time when I went to school, so that was really stunning to me. And the program that the students put together was really remarkable. And I think it was great that they invited, and we had the attendance of our State Attorney General, Javier Becerra, a McClatchy graduate. So it was really an incredible showing of support, student-led. Also, this Saturday, I'm proud to announce we'll be doing a naming ceremony for the McClatchy athletic fields. We expect several hundred folks to be there. It should be a great event starting at 10 in the morning on Saturday, and invite people to come to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson. Board Member Vang.
Thank you, President Ryan. First, I want to just speak directly to the Meadowview community. I want to just welcome everyone back to school and also share that it's been an extremely hard week for many of our students and families in South Sacramento, and particularly in Meadowview, who are grieving the tragic death of Stephon Clark. In reflecting on the recent tragedy and the turmoil that has really engulfed the city of Sacramento, where I was born, grew up in, and love, my heart breaks. And it's been a really crazy past 2 weeks not being able to get sleep at night. Many of our young people, many of our students of color, Black and brown, are already exposed to traumatic events in their lifetimes. And most often than not, a lot of that racial trauma goes unnoticed. In particular, given the exposure to social media and all the video posting of police brutality, I think many of our youth and our Black and brown families are also re-traumatized because of that. I want to share, and I want to speak directly to the Meadowview community to let them know that superintendent and our board has been diligently working really with urgency to support our principals, teachers, and staff on site to ensure that students are receiving emotional and trauma-informed services. I've met with several parents and students this week who has raised questions about resources available. We have had staff on site at our Meadowview schools, and we will continue to support our students. In addition, a letter will also be sent home to parents. And like the superintendent, he mentioned earlier regarding our 27 support centers, I want to just also share that we have 7 located in Area 5. John Still, Rosa Parks, Edward Kimball, Parkway, Harkness, Woodbine, Susan B. Anthony all have student support center as well. So I would really encourage our families to reach out. I also want to take this time to thank our frontline responders, our principals, staff, and especially our CBOs, our community-based organization, who's been really servicing our families and our students at this time. And in particular, I want to give a shout out to Ms. Jackie Rose from Focus on Family and her team, just for the incredible work that they've done to support our Meadowview students and also the Clark family during this time of need. I want to thank everyone who has called me, who has texts, who have sent messages, and I want to thank you for continuing to be my eyes and ears on the ground. And I know along with me and superintendent, the board, we welcome any suggestions to continue supporting our students. Lastly, I want to make just an announcement regarding a community event that's happening this Saturday, April 7th, from 10 to 12. Councilmember Larry Carr, who represents the Meadowview area, and Mayor Darrell Steinberg will be hosting a community meeting from 10 to 12, 2450 Meadowview at the San Pannell Community Center. And I'm encouraging parents and residents to attend that meeting. At that meeting, there will be discussions and updates regarding the tragic event that happened to Stephon Clark, but in particular, staff from the city of Sacramento will also be there to share some proposal around community investment in the Meadowview neighborhood. And I would really encourage parents and residents to attend, to be part of those discussions, because we know that what happens in our neighborhood schools or what happens in our neighborhoods also impacts our schools. Again, refreshments will be provided, translation will be provided, so I'm encouraging folks to attend the community meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Vang. Item 10.7, Board Committee Reports, Board Facilities Committee.
Thank you, President Ryan. The Board Facilities Committee has been meeting regularly, and our next meeting will be held April 24th at noon.
Thank you. Board Budget Committee.
Our next meeting will be held Thursday, April 19th at 3:30 here at the Cerna Center.
Thank you. Board Governance and Policy Committee.
The Governance and Policy Committee will be meeting next Friday, April 13th. And at that meeting, we are going to give updates on our Safe Haven Board policy. And so we're still encouraging folks to attend. It's here at Cerna, 11:30 to 1:30. And you could email me via to RSVP. And I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Vang. Board Evaluation Committee. And I believe Ellen Cochran's not here tonight, so that won't be coming up. Thank you. Item 11.0, Business and Financial Information Reports. 11.1, Business and Financial Information Received, the Enrollment and Attendance Report for month 6, ending in February 16th, 2018. Item 12.0, Future Board Meeting Dates and Locations. Our next board meeting will be held on April 19th, with closed session beginning at 4:30, open session at 6 p.m. at the Cerna Center. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Second. All those in favor? Aye. This is adjourned.